Spectrovision Radio.
Mom went first, and Dad followed shortly after. As an only child, I wasn't surprised they'd left the house to me. What I think would have surprised them, however, is that Ethan and I moved in and made it our own as soon as we could. Whether or not we would do so was never a debate. We were pretty much broke, and despite my grief, having somewhere to go to take the pressure off was a kind of silver lining. It was strange. I'd kept how much I'd been struggling a secret from my parents, but even now they were gone, they were still somehow looking out for me, providing, protecting. The first time I walked through the house as its owner was bittersweet. I was suddenly acutely aware of all the stories it held within, all the narratives that in some way were little pieces of my family's life, our identity. Even scuffs on the kitchen counter and marks on the wallpaper all had stories I'd been a part of. It was suddenly a space pregnant with meaning. The whole thing was overwhelming. But more than that, it was just sad. The idea that our story, like all stories must do at some point, had come to an end. It was Ethan who first noticed it. We'd only been moved in for a couple days, still navigating our way through a sea of cardboard boxes and suitcases. "Come check this out," he said. I followed his voice and found him in the guest bedroom, what had been my room when I was growing up. "What?" I asked, coming to a stop beside him. He pointed to the corner of the ceiling just above the door. There was something there, a blemish on the paintwork. A symbol, maybe? Small enough that I couldn't properly make it out. "I'm gonna get the stepladder," Ethan said, making his way out of the room. Once he dragged it over, I climbed up to get a closer look and saw what the mark actually was. In what looked like thick pencil, or even charcoal, was a drawing of an open eye. "Fucking weird," Ethan said when he went up to take a look. But I had nothing when he asked me if it meant anything to me. It was weird, sure, but I was still too raw to give it much consideration at that point. Instead, I busied myself with unpacking. But later that day, I spotted another one, this time in the corner of the ceiling in the living room. It caused me to check the whole place over. I found that same drawing of that small open eye in every single room of the house. Suddenly, it felt like a place that concealed stories I'd never been told. Secret stories. That night, we ate dinner on the couch in front of the TV. I was feeling uncomfortable, and I felt like watching some of my favorite shows and drinking a couple glasses of wine might anesthetize me a little. "Feels kind of strange being here," Ethan said, mouth full, "considering your folks never liked me and all." I sighed. It was true. Though they'd never explicitly said it, the couple times they'd met Ethan had been much frostier encounters than I'd anticipated. They'd never been that way with any of my other partners, and I'd never got around to asking them why. "They never got a chance to properly know you," I replied, giving him what I'd decided was the most probable explanation. He shrugged and shoveled some more food into his mouth. "Well, I guess it doesn't matter now," he said. I felt my blood pressure rise. I waited. But when it was clear he wasn't going to come to the realization that his words had been careless, hurtful, I decided to let it go. No use making him feel guilty for offense he hadn't meant to cause, I thought. At some point in the night, I got up to pee. I went into the bathroom and sat on the toilet. It was then, sitting alone in the dark, that I heard it. I froze. Whoever had spoken those words, it sounded like they were in the room with me. Really close, yet echoey somehow.
Leave.
The second time it came, the fear catapulted me to my feet. I scrambled for the light switch and turned it on. The bathroom came into view, but sure enough, I was alone. I span around, desperately trying to understand.
Leave.
There was no way it was in my head. I could hear it.
Leave.
I tried to focus on where it was coming from, but when I hit on it, it didn't make any sense. I realized it was coming from inside the basin. I took a step forward so I was looking over it, staring directly down into the drain. "Who is that?" I asked, feeling utterly stupefied by what I was doing, but not knowing what other course of action to take.
Leave.
I felt like I recognized the voice, but it was too whispered, too distant, for me to put my finger on where I'd heard it before. "Where are you?" I eventually managed to ask, almost unable to bring myself to believe the fact this was happening. The voice didn't reply. Instead, strange banging noises from inside the plumbing ensued, followed by the sound of the drain gurgling. It got louder and closer, until blood began to rise up into the basin. I screamed as it pooled there for a moment, viscous and bubbling, before it sank back down into the drain, leaving the basin stained red. I closed my eyes, praying I was still asleep, praying this was a dream. When I opened them again, the basin was clean, as if nothing had happened. I waited, but the voice didn't come back either. I stumbled back until I hit the wall. What the fuck was happening? If I'd hallucinated the whole thing, then it was a hallucination completely indistinguishable from reality. I made my way back to the bedroom, climbed back into bed next to a still sleeping Ethan, and lay awake the rest of the night. But it wasn't those horrifying images that kept me from sleep. It was the voice. Because the more I played it back in my mind, the more I felt I recognized it. It was my mother's voice. It's too provocative. That was Ethan's assessment when I showed him a new outfit I'd just bought. Now we were a little less worried about money. Unconvinced by his judgment, I went into the guest bedroom to take a look at myself in the full-length mirror. And when I did, I screamed. Instead of the image I was expecting, a head-to-toe reflection of me wearing the outfit he'd condemned, I saw myself adorned only by blood, every inch of my skin smothered in it, bleached red, and my father standing behind me. But then, in the blink of an eye, the image in the mirror's reflection changed. It was just me, in the outfit I'd wanted to check. I tried to calm my breathing, tried to get a handle on things, before heading back to Ethan in the kitchen. "Did you not hear me scream just now?" I asked. Ethan looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I assessed his expression. His confusion seemed genuine. "Nothing," I said. "Forget it." I started to take off the outfit. "So you came to your senses," Ethan said. "Next time ask me before you buy." The following day, I decided to get rid of the mirror. I waited until Ethan was out of the house and approached it delicately, careful not to see my own reflection in it. When I pulled it away from the wall, I gasped and almost dropped it. On the wall, behind where it had been standing, was the drawing of an eye. exactly like the ones in the corners of the ceiling in every room in the house. Only this one was much bigger, staring at me, unblinking, somehow always watching. Things got worse after that. Ethan kept asking me what was wrong, growing frustrated by how distracted and unattentive I seemed, as he put it. One morning, when he was being bitter about the way I was acting, I went into the bathroom and pulled back the shower curtain to find someone laying in the tub. It took me a second to realize that the person I was looking at was me, because the things I'd been subjected to, they were things I wasn't capable of conjuring up, even in my worst nightmares. This other me was dead. Nothing, not even something impossible that I didn't understand, could be put through what it had and survive. But then, the other me turned its head. I jolted back as it opened what was left of its eyes. I turned and ran, screaming my way through the house as I tried to find Ethan. I ran to the front of the house and saw him through the window. He was in the car, literally just about to pull away and drive off. Fast as I could, I bolted out the door and tried to get him to stop, but I was too slow, and by the time I was on the driveway, he'd already turned the corner and was out of sight. I spent the next hour inching my way back towards the bathroom door, every fiber in my body trembling. I couldn't quite believe I was heading back in there, but I was driven by a strange force, like somehow I knew I needed to see. When I finally crossed the threshold, the other me was gone. I mustered up the courage to tell Ethan what had been happening, showed him the giant eye I discovered behind the mirror. He listened, expressionless. "You gotta go see the doctor," he said when I was finished. "Did you actually listen to what I just said?" I asked. "The eyes, the voice, the visions, all this weird shit I've been experiencing. A doctor isn't going to be able to help with that." He stared back at me, and finally his expression shifted too. Not pity, but ridicule. "You talking like this, losing your rationality, that only makes me think you need a doctor even more," he said. I sank. I felt small, frustrated, and alone. "The sad truth is your parents were probably kinda nuts," Ethan added. "And that stuff runs in families." Those words hurt me, but I hid my feelings, partly because I didn't have the energy to fight, and partly because I feared what he was saying was the truth. "They're telling me to leave," I said. "My parents do not want me here." Ethan scoffed. "Your parents are gone," he replied, "and you need to get a fucking hold of yourself." The final straw was what I found in the shed. Ethan was shopping, or so he said. He'd been finding excuses to spend most of his time away from me since I'd told him about what was happening. Those eyes, knowing there was one in every room, it left me restless. I felt observed. I decided to go out and buy paint, but first, I made my way to the shed. I had a vague memory of seeing brushes and rollers in there and wanted to check before I bought any. When I got in there, I saw something which looked out of place. There was a duffel bag under the workbench. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to open it. As I did, I suddenly felt my parents watching me, but when I craned my head around, I was still alone in the shed. Inside the duffel bag, I found a few things: rope, tape, handcuffs, a knife, and a gun. Ethan had arrived back home and was coming towards me when I ran out of the shed screaming. I told him what I'd seen, and he just stood there. I told him to come with me, that I could prove what I was saying was real, but he shook his head. I don't need to look, 'cause I know there's nothing there, he said. I didn't think I had a higher gear, but him reducing everything I was going through to one dismissive sentence sent me over the edge. My voice got louder than it ever had been in my life as I unleashed everything I'd been bottling up. Ethan's jaw clenched. He took a step forward and grabbed me by the shoulders. "You're crazy. You realize that, don't you?" he yelled. "This is all in your fucking head." He pushed me to the ground and stormed off in the opposite direction, back into the house, and I heard the front door slam behind him as he left. That night, I awoke from a restless sleep with the strange feeling that I wasn't alone, that there was someone downstairs. By the time I'd cried myself to sleep, Ethan still hadn't come back home. I crept downstairs, expecting to see him. When I turned the corner and the living room opened up before me, I froze. In the almost dark, I could just about see the silhouettes of two people sitting on the couch. Mom and Dad. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked.
"For you,"
my dad said.
For you.
My mom repeated. I collapsed to the ground, sobbing. When I managed to look back up again, there was nothing there. I was all alone. After that night, after Ethan stormed out of the house, after I saw that vision of my parents in the living room, it all stopped. I tried reaching out to Ethan, but he wanted nothing to do with me. One day, I came home to find all his stuff gone and his key on the kitchen table. I racked my brain trying to figure out what I'd done to deserve my parents haunting me? Was that the right word? But I couldn't. Aside from the usual petty shit all families fight about, I couldn't come up with a single thing I'd done to merit them torturing me from beyond the barrier of death. It wasn't until a few years later that I figured out what they'd meant when they said "for you." That night when I'd crept downstairs and seen the shapes of two people who couldn't possibly be there. I did eventually see Ethan again, but this time it was on the news. When I heard about the crimes he'd committed, the horrific fate he'd subjected people to, I realized my parents had been protecting me, trying to warn me. They knew what Ethan was, what I hadn't been able to see. I stayed in that house. I eventually even met someone new. They eventually moved in. We eventually got married. We eventually had kids. We eventually grew old together. And I never saw my parents again.